Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to start shortly. We just don't have quorum yet, so we'll wait a couple more minutes. Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our November CPIC meeting. Father Dave, would you please lead us in an opening prayer?
Sure. We'll start in the name. We'll just start within our Father, name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks, Father Dave. And Andrea, could you please play the land acknowledgement for us?
As we know it today
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations and the Métis,
from the lands of the Anishinaabe
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lake
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today
on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect
the four directions:
lands, waters, plants,
animals, and ancestors
that walked before us.
All of these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God.
We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Thank you very much, Andrea. To start the meeting, we'd like to get approval for tonight's agenda. Can I have somebody please make a motion, or if there are any changes or additions they'd like to have made, please put up your hand or type in the chat. If not, I need someone to approve and somebody to second, please.
I'll move to approve. It's Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
I'll second it. It's Maria.
Thanks, Maria. In the minutes from last month's meeting, October meeting, they were attached to the agenda. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review them. Is there any additions or changes? And if not, can I have somebody make a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve. Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. And somebody to second, please.
I'll second. It's Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. All right, moving on to item number 3 in the agenda. We're going to be Lisa Colomore Sita Jayaraman. Hope I pronounced that right, Sita. And Andrea Swindon are going to take us through the Halton District Catholic School Board Census.
Good evening, and thank you so much. I'll just give it a minute for my colleague Andrea to share our PowerPoint. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about the upcoming student census in 2022. Can I ask you to flip to the next slide, please, Andrea? So what we're hoping today, Dr. Lisa Collymore, Andrea, and I are to give you a little bit about the context for why we're doing the student census, tell you a little bit about the student pilot, census pilot that we did last year in May, and some, how we're preparing for the upcoming board-wide census and what our communication plan is. So that's what we're hoping to provide today. Next, please. So the student census itself, when we talk about it, it's an online survey that will collect identity-based information about our student population. So when this kind of data is linked to other student data sources, the identity-based information can help us as a board know more about our students and their experiences in school. It can also help us address any systemic barriers that may emerge through the analysis of the data and help us foster a more welcoming and positive learning environment. I also wanted to mention that this data collection is actually mandated under the 2017 Anti-Racism Act, and all Ontario school boards are required to collect this data through a census in compliance with Ontario's anti-racism data standards. Next, please. So we're asked to collect information through the voluntary student census on these 10 items, and I've presented them to you here in this graphic. And the anti-racism data standards requires us to specifically collect around the information on race, ethnicity, religion, Indigenous identity, but the Equity Secretariat within the Ministry of Education requires us to collect these 10 different categories. Next. So again, to reiterate, when we collect this kind of data, it's to create and promote a more equitable and inclusive learning environment. It's really to help every student achieve, believe, and belong in Halton Catholic, and again, to verify, measure, address, and monitor gaps and systemic disparities that may emerge through this data collection. Next. So the work of data collection is really a key component of the board's equity and inclusive education policy. As a board, we are committed to creating safe, inclusive, and welcoming learning environments that support student achievement and well-being in our Catholic schools. Human rights and equity are guiding values that are consistent with Catholic social teaching that affirm the dignity of every human being, every student. So data collection is really about supporting student achievement and well-being. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lisa Collymore.
Thanks, Sita. Good evening, everyone. So in preparation for the board-wide census, last year we embarked on a pilot study, and so that's one of the first steps that you undertake when you want to collect large data and you're testing out a new process. So our pilot study really had 5 main goals: to determine the feasibility of the study protocol and identify any weaknesses, to test the appropriateness of the data collection measures, so the actual survey tool, to test the process, so how long it would take students and parents to fill it out, to test the data entry and coding processes, and also to test whether or not the census questions were understandable and they were asking the intended questions. So our process was pretty lengthy. It took the entire year from start to finish. It started with us connecting with other boards, securing funding, developing what the census communication tools would look like, the actual census questions, and setting it up. And of course, administering it to a small group of students and their parents, and then afterwards reflecting on all of the data that we received. Overall, how we did this, we selected 6 schools in our community to participate, and we randomly selected different grades in the different schools. And Sita and I had created a recruitment video for the participants, and we had over 100 views of that video. Ultimately, we heard from just over 200 people in the pilot study, 223 students. And for a pilot study, that's a good number because it gives us workable data. And what we learned was that, we needed to refine our process a little bit in terms of how we connected with our families. But overall, we heard from who we needed to hear from parents of K-3 all the way up until secondary level. So we believe that we are well prepared for the board-wide rollout in the spring. Next slide. So this brings us to preparing for the board-wide census, which will be implemented this school year in February 28th to April 4th, 2022. The student census is voluntary and all of the questions are optional. All students in our board will be invited to complete the census as follows. So for kindergarten to grade 8, the parents and the guardians will be invited to complete the survey on their child's behalf or with their child. And for students in grades 9 through 12, it will be completed by students during class time. Parents will be notified in advance with a parent information letter and may opt out if they do not want their child to participate or complete the census. So we wanted to introduce you or share with you tonight the promotional video that we've been working on, and we are happy to share it with you right now.
Just give me a second. I think I forgot to turn on the audio. Just a second.
In our cultural background in Indigenous culture, storytelling is important, and knowing who you are and where you're from is the foundation of what we do and who we are.
Gathering reliable data is really important to the work we do here at Halton Catholic. As a Catholic school board, we believe all of our students are made in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, they possess a certain inherent dignity. So how could we not work to support ensuring equitable outcomes for all of our students?
Halton Catholic Trustee School Board is preparing to implement a board-wide census in the spring of 2022. Gathering robust demographic data such as language, race, religion, disability, and Indigenous identity will help us to identify and address barriers to student success and well-being.
The importance of collecting student data is to know who's in our school so that we can gear our learning and gear our education towards student outcomes to make sure that all students achieve, believe, and belong.
It's important to collect demographic data because it makes groups or other people feel more included.
In my school community, it's important to collect demographic data because it allows schools to better understand different backgrounds, characteristics of group of people, ethnicity, and race.
Collecting census data, to me as a parent, is vital. It is vital because it is giving a voice, it is recognizing the diversity, equity, and inclusion of communities across Halton.
When we're looking at specific data, like Indigenous data, it's very, very important to know who our students are, to make people feel that they belong and feel welcome, because for far too long, Indigenous students did not feel welcomed, they did not feel like they belonged, and they certainly did not achieve.
Having the collection of the student census allows us to collect this in an objective manner.
Personally, I believe that it's important for students to complete the new HCDSB census because I think that with the information gained from this census, our school board will be able to make much more inclusive spaces for all students.
As a Muslim student, my lived experiences are definitely different than other students that go to the school. I'm very grateful for the inclusivity shown by the board as it allows me to be the best version of myself.
We know that when we are collecting data about sensitive information, that it can raise concerns about privacy and stigmatization, particularly among families who've experienced discrimination.
As a transgender person, I am hoping my voice can be heard. It might help the people who are trans to not feel alone because they're not alone. And it would make us feel a lot better and more included, that we are heard, that we're seen,
We want to assure you that when we use and collect and disclose our data, we will be following and in compliant with the relevant legislation, and that we will be using protective measures to ensure that we protect your personal information.
This commitment is enshrined in our equity and inclusive education policy and is aligned with our commitment to students to support every student to achieve, believe, and belong.
It is important for all students to complete the student census so HCDSB can gather important information about students in marginalized communities so they can help students achieve, believe, and belong.
Ultimately, gathering the data will allow us to ensure that all students will be able to reach their God-given potential and that we can ensure that all students can achieve, believe, and belong.
We encourage all students and families to participate in the board-wide census. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I encourage all students, no matter what identity that you identify with, to take the student census because it's incredibly important to take to acknowledge the different disparities that students face in our board.
Please fill out the census information.
I'm here today to encourage you to take part in our upcoming student census.
Yeah, by taking the time to provide such information, it allows those who are assisting us, and it takes a village, to raise our children to have better resources, to know where perhaps there are some gaps or some areas that are lacking, and gives an opportunity for those needs to be met.
I encourage you to participate. I encourage you to engage. I encourage you to ensure that your voices are heard, that the education system is enhanced to meet everybody's needs.
Apologize for that. I don't know if on your end it was going blank, the screen, but it kept almost hibernating for me. It is a beautiful video, and I don't think Lisa mentioned, so I will mention that it's also been translated into Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin as well. So we have those versions posted on our website. So now, if you will indulge me, I'll just take another. There, can you hear me now? I think I was just talking into.
Yes, we can hear you, Andrea.
I'm sorry, it turned off when anyhow. I apologize. One of the things I did say, which you probably did not hear, is that that video, as beautiful as it is, has been translated into Spanish, Arabic, and also Mandarin, and the versions are all posted on our website. So I'm just going to take a minute to go over the student census 2022 communications timelines. We are right now in phase 1. It began a couple of weeks ago, and we are calling it our Coming Soon campaign. And what we want to do for the next 3 months is really kind of get the word out there about why we're doing a student census, why it's important, and hopefully really convince parents and students that by the time we roll out and we're ready to launch the census, that they are ready to actually complete it. We will do this in a variety of ways. We've already got our website updated. We've got our school websites updated. We've already started promoting on social media with micro versions of that video that you've seen. And we will have some info sessions coming up, which I will get to in a couple of minutes. Phase 2 is from February 1st to February 27th. That's essentially the month before we launch the survey. And at that point, that's when we will start communicating directly with parents via email. All parents will receive an email letting them know when the census is beginning. And as Lisa mentioned earlier, for elementary students, the parents will be completing the census with them or for them. For secondary students, the parents have an option. If they do not wish their child to complete the census, they can always opt out. It will be at that point through one of those emails that they receive that they will have instructions on how to do that. Phase 3 is February 28th to April 4th, and that's when the student census window is actually open. There will be frequent reminders and shared via email as well as social media. Phase 4 and 5 right now are tentative dates. As Lisa mentioned during the pilot, when she was speaking about the pilot, it is quite a comprehensive process, and so it will take some time to collate the data once all the responses are received. So right now, tentatively, it's scheduled for schools to receive their findings shared in aggregate in December of 2022. And in January of 2023, tentatively, we will hopefully be ready to post the student census report and circulate it to our community. I don't know why it keeps muting me as every time I change I hope you heard the timelines. I think as soon as I change the slide, for whatever reason, it mutes me.
We did, Andrea. Just when you flip the slide, we lost you.
Okay, so these are just the various ways that we're going to promote the census. Through FAQs, we will have social media posts and images. We have digital banners for our platforms for students. There are posters that have been printed, and you'll be seeing them soon in your child's school, or your children will be seeing them at least. Obviously, the videos that we spoke, the video that we just saw, plus the micro videos, infographics, and PowerPoints that will be shared, for instance, with the Catholic school councils. So those are the ways. These are some examples of the promotional material that you may or may not see if you go into your child's school. Those are the print and digital posters. We have some door hangers. Those are the D2L banners. And yeah, another example of the poster there. And in terms of next steps, so phase 1 started on November 1st. I already went over that. Information presentations, and this is new. We just reserved these 2 dates for parent information sessions. There will be more information to follow, but for now, if you mark your calendars, that would be great. Thursday, January 13th and Wednesday, February 9th, and they will take place between 7 and 8. They will be probably live streamed. It will be a virtual info session. We know that for sure, and it will either be live streamed or if we can, we will actually have participation where everybody could be part of the Teams meeting and a little bit more interactive to be able to ask questions. But we're just working through the details of that with our IT department to make sure that we have the capability to do that. So with that, we are at the question slide. If you have any questions of Dr. Collmore or Sita or myself, we'd be happy to answer.
I think Trustee Agnew had a comment in the chat first, so I'll let her speak to that. I think it's involved around possible alternative options for high school students that might need some assistance filling out the questionnaires. Trustee Agnew, do you want to speak to your question?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I was just curious if, and maybe you guys have thought through this, but just looking at Andrea, when you mentioned about the translation into languages, I'm just trying to think about those students that we have who may require alternative communication access or other means, just to try to help them answer the questions or the survey as independently as possible. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that's a conversation we can have with that team, but I think that would be great if we haven't looked at that already.
That's a great question, Brenda. Yeah, that's a Lisa question. I was just going to say. Sorry.
That's okay. Hi, Trustee Agnew. So we have connected with the Spec Ed department, so we have started having that conversation with them. We've also, and they have, we have some meetings set up to see what that would look like at the secondary level, likely through our Spec Ed coordinator. She will help facilitate that. But we've also connected out with other boards to see what they have done, and so we are going to bring that back to the meeting with Spec Ed just to make sure that all the students have what they need when the time comes.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Tiana had her hand up next. Tiana?
Hi, thank you. I just had a question. I heard through the presentation that it's voluntary, and I'm just curious as to how we decide voluntary versus a mandatory census.
Hi, it's Lisa again. So I'll start and Sita can certainly follow up if I've missed anything. So the Equity Secretariat has provided the direction for this one. And so all school boards are mandated to ask or to have the census, but it's voluntary for the students to participate in it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. And Maria had her hand up next.
Hi, I had two questions. The first is, I know you've mentioned, and it was mentioned at the board meeting, that the census is mandated. And I'm just wondering, for those of us who like to, you know, look into things and understand things a little bit more, where exactly is the mandate found? Like, is it a memo from the ministry? Is it a piece of legislation, or where would one go to learn more about the mandate?
I can begin to answer that question, and then maybe somebody would like to jump in, Lisa. So under the Anti-Racism Act of 2017, which is a piece of legislation, you know, school boards are required to collect identity-based data. So that's where the mandate comes from, the Anti-Racism Act of 2017. So that's where we take our mandate to roll out the survey.
So just so I understand, so the mandate is specific to collecting identity-based data. Does it refer to a census specifically, or is that
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it's just that the tool that we're using to meet that mandate.
Right. So the tool is the census. The mandate is to collect that. And
okay.
Yeah, if you want to add to that, Lisa?
No, I was just going to clarify, but you answered.
Thank you for that clarification. So the second question I had, in the video, it talks about Indigenous students not feeling in the past like they belonged and those sorts of things. And then there's a statement that they certainly did not achieve. And so I'm just wondering, like, that's a pretty strong and definitive statement. And I'm just wondering, in the absence of having collected this data in the past, how can we make a statement like that? Like, what backup do we have to support that statement?
So maybe I can start with that. So, you know, research from other boards and other places have shown that traditionally, particularly, you know, historically underserved communities, and Indigenous communities are one of those, have not fared as well. And there's data, and if you give me some time, I can pull that out from other boards that have looked at achievement data for Indigenous students and found that they have not been achieving at the same levels, that there have been achievement gaps. Therefore, sort of that is sort of the background to that statement.
Okay, so that statement is not specific to HCDSB. It's more a more generalized. Okay, that makes sense then. Okay, thank you.
I had a question myself. Is there what is the requirement under the Anti-Racism Act as to how often this information has to be collected?
Do you want to take that one, Lisa, or I can get it started off? They have not yet sort of fixed a duration or a cycle. It's left up to boards and different boards because this is just a process where, you know, different boards have just started this process, so we're still working out those details in terms of, you know, how frequent that will be. For example, TDSB has been doing this for over 15 years, and their cycle is every 5 years. They've been doing the survey. That's one of like in Ontario, TDSB is the longest, sort of has the most experience in this kind of work, and their cycle has been 5 years. But that's not written in stone anywhere. That's for us boards to decide how they want to, what makes sense for them.
Thanks, Sita. That's great. Does anyone else have any other questions? Thanks. Oh, sorry. I see Alex. You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I just have a question. So you said that you did the pilot. So you have the pilot done, so you have everything ready. What are the results going to be? Are the results going to be shared with the community, parents? Do you have a plan already for that?
Yes. we do have a plan. Did you want to speak to that, Lisa?
So, sure. I assume you're talking about or you're referring to the board-wide data that we will be collecting in the spring.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. So we do have a general plan. So right now we are consulting with other boards and also the Equity Secretariat around guidelines as to how that data can be shared. So we are engaging in that sort of consultation with the Secretariat and other boards and our community. But yes, as Andrea mentioned in the communication timelines chart, the plan for that is later this calendar year and early into the following year. Yeah, I see her going back. So just phase 4 and 5. So there is a plan in terms of how or when we would like to present those data to the community, and how exactly that will be shared is still being sort of finalized, but we are taking guidance from the Equity Secretariat and other boards who've done this work already.
Yeah, I think my concern would be like the way in which the census is structured. Is it gonna meet those? I mean, like the goals of the census and what it's doing, the way that it's structured, is it gonna be related to the way that you want to present it to the community, or is it just a gathering of data and then you will decide how you present it to the community?
So that's correct. It will be shared in a way that is sensitive to the information that's collected.
Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yes. I'm trying to figure out how all this information, which is, I think, absolutely valuable for everybody, not only for the board, but for us as parents, for every single committee, how we can like get the most out of it in order to support the strategic plan, but also to be able to work as a community with the parish, with the schools, and with the parents.
And I think, I don't, maybe I missed it if it was mentioned, but I think in phase 2, we are going to have, if not the same presentation, then a similar presentation done at the Council of Chair meeting to assist with that rollout as well. Is that correct, Sita? Is that the plan?
Sorry, in phase 2, if you're looking at this, it's really to just launch, to implement the board-wide survey. But at some point when we do have that data and we have it disaggregated, we will be sharing that. So if you look at examples from other boards, what they've done is to collect the data, analyze, disaggregate, and then share it in terms of, what does achievement look like? What does well-being look like? Who's achieving, who's not? And try to make sense of that. So yes.
We're going to do a similar presentation to this one this evening at a Council of Chair meeting in the future to explain the survey.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So at the end of November, we will be coming out to
February, Sita.
February, Sita.
The next Council of Chairs meeting.
Yes.
Great. And does anyone else have any questions before we move on? Great. Thank you very much, ladies, for all this. We'll move on to item number 9, the board update by Superintendent D'Onofrio. Nancy.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you to Sita, Lisa, and Andrea for that presentation and for sharing with CPIC. So that is correct. We're going to have that presentation to the Council of Chairs. So when we look at that agenda later on tonight, that will be on the Council of Chairs for February. For our board update, as we're all aware, we had Remembrance Day last week, and it was really nice to see how our schools marked Remembrance Day in the schools. And although our high schools were on their turnaround day for quad 1 and 2, all the schools did have a Remembrance Day service at some point earlier last week. This week marks Bullying Awareness Week in Halton Catholic, and all the schools have a variety of activities and events planned for the week. A lot of the work is being led through our child and youth counselors at the school together with staff and students, with a focus on kindness, dignity, and respect. Our schools are also beginning to plan their events for Advent, with schools planning events they will do together at the school virtually and with their local parishes. Some of the schools are planning virtual Christmas concerts, an Advent Mass at the church, an outdoor drive-by community event, and their food drives. So all the things that are being planned at the school are following under the guidelines by Halton Public Health. And so what we traditionally would do during a regular year may not happen this year, but there's a lot of creative ways that the schools are working together with their community to mark the season of Advent. And here at the board, we have our annual Keep Christ in Christmas event taking place with a board event to announce the winners on December 21st. All our schools continue to follow the COVID-19 protocols that our Halton Public Health has in place, which includes masking, protocols for hand hygiene, and distance where possible at the school. We do have a few class closures right now, and the parents in the schools are working together when a child tests positive for COVID and informs Halton Public Health. Right now, we do not have any cases in our high school from the last time I checked today. In our high school setting, our cafeteria services beginning in many of our high school with all the servers being open with the plan for the end of the month. I know that all of them are not up yet, but we're hoping to have that happen by the end of the month. We're continuing with 4 lunches in our high school setting, but with the capacity limits increased, and there's no limit any longer, we are permitted to have 4 to 6 students sitting at a table with social distancing between the tables. Last week, we received the announcement from the Ministry of Education about the D-Stream Grade 9 program for the full program starting in September 22. And we know that some of the grade 8 classes and the high school presentations had already happened. So there will be updates coming from the school board and from the schools to our grade 8 parents and to the community about the grade 9 program for next year. Inter-school sports are continuing in our high schools, and we now have spectators attending our inside events. So whichever, if it's basketball or volleyball happening at the school, we do have spectators going in. Last weekend, the STA and Loyola School hosted the girls field hockey OFSA event with 15 teams across the province participating. And we had the Assumption girls participate in the bronze medal round. They did not win, but they had a good event. Other extracurricular events are happening at the high school. I visited my 2 high schools, and it's wonderful to hear about the arts programs, the music programs, the social justice outreach programs, robotics. All of the different clubs at the schools are up and running, some more now than the second quadmester, depending on the teachers who support those activities and what their quad looked like. Those are now up and running. We are waiting further direction from the Ministry of Education with regards to will we return to a regular semester for semester 2. We do not have that information yet, and we will continue to keep parents updated. So we began our second quadmester on November 12th, and that'll take us to the end of January. In our elementary schools, we are continuing to maintain with our class cohorts for kindergarten to grade 8. Inter-school sports in the elementary level are beginning with volleyball program at the end of November, with competitive play taking place in December and January. This is optional for the schools to participate. So again, everything that happens at the school level with regards to the inter-school sports is with regards to having the coaches to be able to coach those teams and where the skill development of the students are. So each school will communicate to their parents about that. At this time, there's no spectators in our elementary setting for these activities. And we hope in due time we'll be able to open that up. Other extracurricular activities are taking place, a lot of intramural programs, which is accessible for all the students, depending on the grade that they're in, and these will continue to be run throughout the year. Next Wednesday, our progress reports will be going home for our elementary students. These will all be sent home electronically to parents, and parent-teacher interviews will take place November 25th and 26th, and these will be virtual interviews to the parents. So other up-and-coming dates, our kindergarten registration program for September 22 will open on December 6th. So parents will be able to register for their local school for kindergarten, with parents being invited into the school on January 25th and 26th to confirm with documentation. Our early French immersion registration program, which will have no lottery this year, will take place in January. Our extended grade 5 French program application for that will take place in December. That is a lottery entry. So early French immersion is not, extended French is. For parents of students who are in the virtual school or in the brick and mortar school, an opportunity to change the learning environment. We'll have a survey that will go out on January 5th, a 2-week window with a turnaround date for the new learning environment setting for the student on Tuesday, February 22nd. That's it for me. Any questions?
Nancy, I just had a very quick question about the segregation of the high school kids at lunch. Sorry, and you might have mentioned this and I might have missed it, but the purpose of sitting them at 4 to 6 to a table, but separating the tables, is that under health guidelines? I'm just confused as to how segregating tables makes any difference when they're sitting together anyways, mingling. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not cohorted with other tables. So I'm just wondering why the emphasis to separate the tables.
We continue to use the term cohorting for secondary just because of if there is a positive case, it's to identify who the student has been with. So they have their period 1 and period 2 class, that would be one cohort. But then we'll look at where they're sitting at lunch. We need them to remember who they're sitting with. So the tables have to be separated. So that's where it allows for 4 to 6 at a table. Okay, so we're not pushing all the tables together. We do want to still maintain some separation because if there's a positive case, Jen, if there's a positive case at a table, if the tables are close together, then everybody that was around that child would be deemed high risk, especially because it's a time when they're having their masks off. So when they're eating lunch, their masks are off, that considers them high risk.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the reason. Okay.
Jerry?
Hey, thanks, Jen. Hey, Nancy. Just great news, obviously, on the intramural school sports. The fact that they're not happening, that's great. Just anything further on field trips, overnight trips, that kind of thing. What's the updated guidance that's being provided to local admin?
So at this time, Jerry, we haven't opened up to say start planning those overnight trips or the end of the year trips that are happening. You could start planning for it, but we have to be cognizant of the fact of where we're at with COVID and those circumstances. So we haven't said that it's a go just yet. We're waiting to see what the winter brings, but you can at least start investigating and planning if that was a traditional thing that your school did. But when we plan those end of the year trips, one of the things that we always keep in mind is the number of students who can participate in it. And so right now, due to the fact that, for example, if you're going off-site, the traditional Ottawa, Montreal, or Quebec trips, that includes dining at restaurants and things like that, or even being on the bus. Okay, we're now talking about, are there going to be mandates around who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated? So when you're planning a trip like that, those are the things that we have to take into consideration. Is it everyone, or is it a select group of students who get to participate? Those trips should have more than 80% participating. So we got to go slowly with this planning because we're always about what can we do to include all the students in the events. So I have had some schools inquire about that. When we can open up field trips, we will. There's some curricular field trips that are happening at the secondary level. We haven't been doing it at the elementary yet, but our goal is to get there. We just need to see the status for the younger kids who we have students who may not be vaccinated in our elementary setting to have those same opportunities as everyone else.
So for secondary, they're doing field trips, and is that irrespective of their vaccine status?
Jerry, it would be a field trip, for example, for some of our CHISMs that they need to have that opportunity. We're not planning full field trips and things like that the way we traditionally do. Okay, but if there's a specific course or a CHISM that requires to go off-site for that, they are. Okay, but they have to follow Halton public health protocols. Different than when we're talking about the end of the year trips, which includes a lot of dining out and different things like that. Like I know
no, right? Understood. Yeah, not talking about overnight trips, about just regular day field trips. The local museum or whatever, other public facilities, those kinds of things. Can those start happening? I mean, these kids are cohorted already, vaccinated or not. Really, I mean, what's to stop them getting on the bus and going somewhere for the day?
Well, Jerry, a trip has to augment the curriculum program. And so do they need to go on that trip to get the curriculum, or could the teacher deliver the curriculum in another meaningful way at the school? So that's where, you know, that we're there right now, is the teachers are continuing to deliver the curriculum in a meaningful way in the classroom. And at this time, we're not getting field trips. As things improve, or we see how everything is improving within our area, we may get there. We're just not there just yet.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Jared, I think his hand was up from before. All right, thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you.
Appreciate the update. Next on our agenda item is the trustee update from Trustee Deward.
Good evening. A little bit about what trustees were involved over the past month. At the October 19th board meeting, there were two delegations supporting HCDSB diverse student body, a delegation regarding allowing non-Catholic students the ability to run for student trustees was presented. And the response to that delegation was that the Director of Education and Secretary of the Board obtain a legal opinion specifically around the legalities of having non-Catholic student trustees on our Board of Trustees. There are legal implications for not allowing, or conversely for allowing, non-Catholic students to run for and possibly win a student trustee position at HCDSB. The opinion should be sought from legal counsel not affiliated with the OCSTA or our board to elicit the most objective opinion as possible. Be it further resolved that the legal opinion be brought back to the Board of Trustees no later than the next board meeting of November 2nd. Then there was another delegation, delegation on exams for HCDSB secondary student. This was a delegation regarding exams for HCDSB secondary students, which was presented. And the response to that delegation was, be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board request a staff report for the next regularly scheduled board meeting on November 2nd about how students are currently being helped to develop exam writing skills, and for staff to outline final assessment plans by subject matters for grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. At the same board meeting, a couple of policies were passed. Policy II-07, the school day policy, policy II-11, daily teacher plans. At the same meeting, staff presented a couple of reports, and the important ones are expansion of elementary community classrooms, where trustees were provided information on how community living classes could be expanded to include more sites and students. And staff brought back a report on de-streaming of grade 9 math, which was a result of an earlier delegation to the board. At the November 2nd board meeting, a couple of important things here were the North Oakville number 4 Catholic Elementary School Boundary Review Committee recommendations were approved by the Board of Trustees. The legal opinion on student trustees as a result of a motion at the October 19th board meeting was received on the same day as the November 2nd board meeting and was unanimously agreed to be brought back as an information item for the November 15th meeting, which is tomorrow. The report is now part of the package. Tomorrow it's a detailed report, and you could have a look at it yourselves. The report on exams for HCDSB secondary students as well, which was a result of a motion at the October 19th board meeting, was presented to the board. Trustees had requested some more details about how students could be helped to develop exam writing skills to be included. Hence, this report is now updated and it being brought to the board meeting tomorrow. It's in the package again. An update on our schools was provided by Director Daly, and there was a motion which came out of this discussion which passed. And the motion was, be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board send a letter to Dr. Megani appealing the consideration of Halton Region Public Health to relax some of the protocols in our secondary schools, specifically with respect to cafeteria guidelines to allow more flexibility for students. And be it further resolved that the Halton Public Health also give consideration to relax their requirement for the elementary panel to remain in cohorts outside during recess. There was a report on the student census 2022 process, which we just saw now, well presented. Information regarding this, the implementation was provided by staff, and we just saw that some time back. Excellent presentation. Other notable and upcoming items, the next talk in the OCSTA Catholic Leadership Speaker Series will be on November 29th by Justice Peter Lawyers. And the chair, vice chair, trustees are now visiting schools, school council meetings, and school fundraisers as they open up across the region. And yeah, so things are happening and things are opening up. So that's my report. Madam Chair, any questions? I'll be happy to take.
Are there any questions for Trustee Dwart? Maria?
Well, I think I have comments more than questions, but thank you very much for that report. And I know at the last meeting I talked about a little bit of frustration with this student trustee issue kept coming back to the board. I've read the legal opinion that's in the meeting for tomorrow, and I think it's pretty clear. And I'm hoping that it will help us to put that issue behind us. I was a little surprised that the motion excluded Oxter lawyers. I understand it was looking for objectivity, but you know, part of our role here is to preserve Catholic education, and that's part of trustees' role is to do that. So I found it a bit concerning that we would exclude such a significant partner. And I feel like there's been a lot of focus on the belonging pillar. And I'm really hoping that to see more focus on the achieving and believing pillars as well going forward. So I just wanted to share that feedback.
That was a comment. Thank you.
Yes.
No question.
No need for a response, unless you would like to.
No.
Does anybody else have any questions for Trustee Dwart? Thank you very much for your update, Trustee Dwart.
Thank you.
Move on to our standing items on our agenda. The first up is our WAPSY update. Denise.
Thank you. So just two pieces of information from my update for this particular meeting. November 18th, we, as I mentioned at the council chairs, I have set a date to present the new to role training for our WAPSY reps. All are welcome, but a particular focus on our reps who are new to the role. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation, and that will run from approximately 7 to 8 p.m. In addition, at that presentation, I will also present the upcoming webinar series, the first of it for this year from WAPSY, which will take place on Saturday, November 20th. It's called Rebuilding Our Resiliency as Parents. And the agenda works a little bit like this. At 10 a.m., there'll be a welcome and a commissioning for all WAPSY reps across the province. At 10:30, there will be a presentation by Miguel Martinez, and at 12 p.m. by Sarah Westbrook and Paul Davis. So our reps have hopefully received emails by this time from WAPSY itself. Anyone who wishes to join, it's not necessary just for WAPSY reps. Any parents that wish to join are welcome to register at awapsy.org. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Denise. Moving on to updates from our CPIC subcommittees. We'll start with the School Council Support Committee. Tiana or Laura?
Hi, thank you, Jen. I'm just going to say a quick little blurb, and then Laura will come in with a bit more detail on a few items. So we've had another meeting, and we've been doing quite a bit of work. We don't have much to say on the handbook yet. I did see an email come by after we had our meeting, which I haven't had a chance to totally review yet. So we can maybe have more to say about the handbook on our next session. In this one too, we have the other two objectives that we've been looking at, which is the virtual platform for Virtual Platform Resource Center, as well as increasing communication amongst school councils. So with that, I'm going to let Laura speak to that. Sorry, just one more thing too. We were asked to take the lead on the social media for CPIC as well. And Laura has volunteered to do that as well. So I'll let Laura speak now.
Thanks, Tiana. So to Tiana's point, there's two things that we'll be looking at as part of our mandate as a team. So one of them being the resource page. So we had a little bit of discussion around where the resource page should lie and how it should be accessible. And some of the ideas we tossed around was having the resource page, the best avenue for it would be through the board site. But we also thought it might be beneficial to have this resource landing page, and it's in essence a link that takes you to another page with all the resources that school councils can share. And it would make sense to have it potentially password protected or accessible with a login for, maybe it's a universal login for all the schools or for a family of schools. We can sort of drill down on the logistics of it at a later time. But the reason we thought that might be a good idea is because it, through that resource page, school councils will share various pieces of information that, not for lack of transparency to the community or parents, but more so just to keep some information a bit proprietary, especially when it comes to, vendors that we might be negotiating pricing with for, fundraising efforts and so forth. So, when it comes down to it, there's certain things we potentially don't want to share with the general public. So a login would allow a bit of a secure place for that information to be shared with the school board in general for all of Halton. So that's one of the things that we thought about in terms of that resource page. All of the elements of the resource page will take some time to build, but we've got a lot of ideas in terms of what could be part of that, and it's going to be a living page to some extent. There's always going to be things that we will add and take away and build upon, so that will be always an evolution. So, but I think we can start it with some really good information. And then secondly, the social media management. So I've, happy to take the lead on managing that whole piece of it for CPIC. There's just going to be, I guess, some discussion with the board in terms of, which platforms we were going to promote, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or all of them or one of them. So we need to just decide which platforms we're going to use. And then also, what is the content that we want to share, having a regular schedule and the regularity of those posts. So how often do we want to post? And then finally, how do we manage the feedback that comes through those social media platforms? If there's a question, does it get tabled through the CPIC board and the committee, and then we take it from there? So, who has authority to make those responses and so forth. So lots of things to sort of discuss in terms of the logistics on managing that, but certainly happy to take the lead on that. So I'll just kind of open up the floor for any questions if anybody has any.
Hi, it's Violetta. I just have a question of the timeline. Do you have any for the social?
Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback on the line, so I didn't catch the question. I'll try and mute my line for a second and see if that helps.
Yeah, just asking if you have a timeline for the social media.
Truthfully, that'll be dependent on CPIC, and I'm ready to go forward as quickly as possible. So I think maybe we just need to have a follow-up discussion with CPIC and see who, whether it's Jerry or others, whether it's the board, just to decide all of those items in terms of content, regularity, and so forth. So I guess that'll be determined by the board to some extent.
Nancy, I'll let you jump in there. I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Jen. Laura, and to Violetta's question, what I think we'll do is we'll set up a meeting with somebody from the communications team, somebody from Andrea Swindon's team, to meet with you as a group. So to give some guidance on what type of content and which platform that you want to. The thing is, we could use all of them, but if maybe that's going to spread the committee too thin. So I think the communications department will give you the best direction as to what would be the most beneficial in terms of sharing information and getting the messaging that you want to use through the social media platforms. So what's your goal? Is it to inform parents about events? Is it to share resources? So understanding what your goals are, then that will help the communication team guide you onto what's the best way to do it. Okay, so I'll take that back so that we can reach out to Andrea's team. Okay.
Great. And I will mention Vince Monaco will also be assisting on that project, just sort of helping sort of to gather information. But as far as the day-to-day media management, I'll take care of that. But Vince will be helping in conjunction with myself. So.
Okay, sounds great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Alex has her hand up. Alex, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me there?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I was exactly going to mention something very similar. My question is, just to be clear, because this was a discussion that we had with Andrea quite a long time ago when CPIC was going back to the Facebook page and the Instagram and the social media, is what kind of narrative and voice as a committee do we want to present to the parents? And just because I've had this question, especially in the last 6 months or the last year, because we need to make CPIC really identified as what it is, the Catholic Parent Involvement Committee. I know there's many pages on Instagram that refer us as parent engagement, but they're not exactly what it is, like this committee that is part of a mandate, right, at the board. So this is my understanding that this CPIC committee is independent from the board in the sense that it's made by the parents, but we need to have that clear narrative and voice in order not to be confused, right, by certain things. So what you were saying, Nancy, about, what is really the messaging that we want to send, if we're informing parents, if we're sharing resources, just to make sure that the voice that we present is a voice that not only represents everybody, but at the same time, it's a voice that is supported by every single, like, let's say, member of the committee, and also that promotes, inclusivity and
Sorry, Alex, I think we lost you there, or perhaps you've been muted.
Yes, it says that someone muted me, so I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know at what point I got muted, but yeah, that is really my concern. I know we really need nowadays, especially, to have a very clear voice from CPIC, and the narrative, the voice, the messaging, just to make very sure that there's a very good guidelines as to not fall, right, in situations in which CPIC might be misunderstood, or there's going to be a lot of debate or things that might take away from what the committee's purpose is. So that is my only concern.
I think you're muted again.
Yeah. So Nancy, you were proposing that Andrea and some people from the communication committee will get together with CPIC. Like, do you mean like in our next CPIC meeting or something, just to have a discussion open for all the members of the committee? Was that what you were thinking about?
What I would do first, Alex, is I'm going to, Andrea's on the call right now, so she's hearing this. And Vince Monaco, because he's the staff representative that's on that subcommittee, that they can coordinate a meeting time together with the subcommittee. The subcommittee then discusses with Andrea, sort of understanding the different platforms, and discusses the goals. Then this subcommittee, the school council support committee, come back to CPIC in January with what it is that you're going to do. And then that's where you can get, Alex, the input from the rest of the group at that time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we could do little things from now until the January meeting to just sort of get out there. And I would just, it's always good positive messaging to parents so that they have some activity with it, or we can wait until January until it's presented to CPIC, and then we can get the platforms going at that point. Okay.
I think, like, from my point of view, the most important part is to, for example, the new image of CPIC, that just make it known to the parents and just start building and it's not starting from scratch, but really an educational campaign where the parents can understand what CPIC is. I think that would be a good starting ground, at least for me, because for the many years that I've been in the committee, I know there's a lot of it's not misunderstanding of what CPIC is, but just not enough knowledge of how CPIC can serve the parents and the community. So I think that would be something that would be actually, for me, from my point of view, like a good head start, right? Just to be presenting a lot of things that can open that space for the community to give us that feedback and to make it a very active and positive reinforcement for the parents and for the community.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And Andrea's on, and I know that Vince is on as well. So I know this feedback will be taken back when the committee meets with them. Okay.
Thank you. Jerry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in there, just maybe to help address a little bit of what Alex is asking and saying. Yeah, I mean, Alex, I mean, obviously, the whatever we do in social media needs to align with what our mandate is as a committee, consistent with appropriate messaging and the kind of information we want to share. And also, it's really about being in the places where the people we represent are, and that is they're in the social media realm, and we at least my belief is we need to be there too, because communication has evolved so much, and for good or for ill, a lot of that includes social media. So I hear you loud and clear in terms of we need to go carefully here and make sure we don't lose control of our message and that kind of thing. And I actually, this kind of came to light, beginning of this year when Joel McLeod, one of our past members, said, hey, I hold the credentials to our social media accounts, on Twitter and Insta and Facebook. So number one, they already exist. They're already out there. So obviously it's time we need to take those credentials over, by the subcommittee. But I also approached, Jen and I talked about, we approached Nancy and said, hey, I think we need some level of board involvement here. Yes, the social media stuff needs to be driven by us, the content, what gets delivered, when it gets delivered, how we engage that way, it has to be driven by the committee. But I think, and I think this is where we're going next with next steps, is what does that look like in terms of engagement with the board, and how do we, is there some moniker or some level of oversight or control? Not maybe control is probably the wrong word, but certainly oversight, just to maintain consistency, as some place for the accounts to live long term, because an individual committee member owning the social media credentials, I don't know if that's the right answer either. But I'll say work in progress clearly, but I think it is a place where we need to be. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, and I agree with you. I just think we need a strong positioning, and in a good sense, not getting strong, but really to have a very clear image and a very clear messaging. So once we get to that social media, that is so much needed, because I think that my point is not saying to not do it, but to do it in a way that we can really establish what CPIC is in that social media, because I think there's a lot of groups that have many of the same words, like parent engagement or parents of this and that. So just to make sure that we have a very clear, I don't know if the word is branding, but that it's very consistent with the image that CPIC has developed lately, and with the narrative, and to be very strong so we can really get to social media with a very good stepping stones. That was one of my concerns, just to I'm excited of thinking how it's gonna look, to be honest. I know there's very capable people in our committee that that know much more than I know about social media. I consider me totally illiterate in that sense, but I'm really looking forward to that, to have really a very, very good presence in the community that really supports the parents. And it's all the time building up, so we can continue building what this committee is, and just building, like the image of the board and the parent, the parish, all these relationships that we have and what joins us together, just to make sure that it is a very, very solid image.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Tiana and Laura, for the presentation. Looks like the subcommittee is going to be very busy. Appreciate all your initiatives. Next up for subcommittee update is the Parent and Community Engagement Committee, which is Alex is now chairing this subcommittee. So Alex, you're up again.
Okay, so we met last Wednesday, and thank you for choosing me. It was kind of a surprise for me, but I think we're really trying to get a couple of items done, especially, like trying to get a couple of webinars or engagements with Bishop Lobsinger. So we really had a good brainstorming session, and I hope that by the next meeting we can have certain dates. We're really wanting to try to have an Advent webinar and something for Lent, which can be brought to the communities. And definitely Denise provided the committee a really good list of speakers. So we're going to be working together to try to see what we can achieve this year, and based on that, apply for grants before December 1st. It was the date that the grants are due. So yeah, really looking forward to that, and I hope I can give you a couple of news for the next meeting.
Nancy?
Alex, I just wanted to, I set the date for December 1st so that all the schools would submit that information to me, so we could ensure that the money is going to be utilized. Okay, so if you're not ready for December 1st, we can, you know what I mean? We can be a little flexible with that. Okay, I would want it by the beginning of January because you need time to plan, especially you're booking guest speakers. But know that that date was a little bit ambitious to ensure the schools actually use the money before the end of the year.
That's good. I like that you put us this goal. So we're looking forward, and I hope very soon I can get you some information about the speakers, and we can do with this committee in the next months.
Okay, great.
Thanks very much for that update, Alex. And I got to sit in on some of that meeting, and it's there's some really great ideas. It's exciting to see this subcommittee start to take off. And I agree, Maria put in the chat there. There's some great. It's nice to see the focus on faith with some of these webinars. It's going to be great. Next up on the agenda is the update, please.
Hi, good evening again, everyone. Yeah, so we met as a subcommittee recently, and we're continuing our work on revisions and updates and refinements to the to CPIC's bylaws. One of which of the items will be coming later this evening, talking about the voting privileges as per the bylaws and the regs. So that'll be coming up shortly here. Also, what we started talking about is a continuation of a discussion from last year, is the composition of our parent members on the committee. So presently we have representation of 2 each from Oakville, Burlington, and North Halton. So 6 regional representatives plus 4 at large. The discussion underway, and we'll come back to the committee at a future meeting to discuss this further and decide on it, is do we align a little bit more with the representation of our representation across the board in terms of number of schools in each of the areas, and it happens to also align with how the Board of Trustees is set up. So taking rather than 2 in each geographic area, having 3. So 3 Oakville, 3 Burlington, 3 North Halton, and then potentially taking North Halton and breaking it down as well. 2 for Milton, 1 for Halton Hills, and then remaining with 1 at-large position at the end of the day. So the number of representatives would remain the same, but potentially redistributed to give better representation across the region. So that's probably the most significant one that we're undertaking right now to look at. And then we'll continue our work throughout the rest of the bylaws over the course of the year. That's it for now.
Thanks, Jerry. Any questions for Jerry before we move on? Great. Okay, next up is CPIC representation on board committees. I'm not actually sure if any of these board committees have met, so this might be a quick run through on the agenda. Jordan, has there been a mental health board committee meeting?
That is going to be on Wednesday.
Great. Violetta, Homeschool Parish Partnership, is there any update with that committee?
Thank you, Jen. No, I have no updates at this time since no meetings have taken place, but would like to take this opportunity to ask the board if they anticipate a kickoff meeting before the end of 2021.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Violetta, I'll take that back to Superintendent Nar and ask her, okay, when she's in the office tomorrow, when their meeting's planned for.
Thank you.
And last up is the Walk with Jesus, which Tiana, I'll let you speak to this, but I'm presuming given that the event is in May, there may not have been a meeting yet. Tiana?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. There's nothing to report at this time.
Great. Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda, we have is the action item about voting privileges for the WAPSY and Deanery rep. I'm kind of perhaps combining the agenda, which Maria had added to the agenda. I think it just makes sense to put them together. Maria began this discussion with us or gave everybody kind of an update as to where we were and where we are with the current bylaws and historically what's happened. Maria, do you want to maybe kind of reiterate and then perhaps I will let others open the floor to others to have their questions or comments, and then perhaps we can take a vote on the issue as to what we as CPIC would like to see happen with these positions. Currently written as that they do not have voting privileges as they are not elected, but instead are appointed. But I know, as Maria has mentioned in our previous meeting, that perhaps that wasn't intended to be that way, and it was not that way. Take this off.
So do you want me to go ahead, Jen, then?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I wasn't necessarily prepared, but I think I can speak to it off the top of my head pretty easily anyways. So our previous bylaws did identify the WAPSY rep and the Deanery rep as community reps. And this is also consistent with the board procedure. The board policy doesn't speak to this, but the procedure document does. It clearly identifies CPIC as having 3 community reps, being the WAPSY rep, the Deanery rep, and 1 sort of generic community rep. So I was surprised to learn that our Deanery rep and our WAPSY reps weren't being given voting privileges in our meetings, and I questioned that. I also reviewed Regulation 612 pretty extensively. I think, you know, again, as I said in the last meeting, it is pretty clear to me that those people fall under community rep because the regulation sets out the membership that every PIC must have and that it may have. And so we have to work within those. Certainly we can put other parameters in as long as they don't conflict with the regulation, but it's pretty clear, you know, must and may sets the limitations of what the membership should be. I also looked into what other Catholic boards do in the province, and I spoke to the WAPSY executive director. Every other WAPSY director who sits on a CPIC in Ontario does have voting rights. It also had been brought up that historically those positions did not have voting rights on this committee. but both Alex and Denise, who have been here for quite a number of years, indicated that in the past those positions did. So it's unclear when it changed or. To me, it's not even a question. I think we aired in April, we brought the bylaws to the committee to vote on revisions, but the revisions were presented as being just some cleanup, grammar, just getting rid of duplication, but not to be substantive changes. And as I've said multiple times, I really feel myself responsible for not noticing that this change was made, which is substantive, because it now identified the deanery rep and the WAPSY rep as being not community reps, but rather other reps, which took their voting rights away, because there's no other reps in the regulation. The regulation says that parent members and community members have voting rights. To me, I want to be really clear. I think it's inappropriate for us to be voting on this, because I think a mistake was made and an inaccurate interpretation has been taken. And I think we just need to revert back to what our previous bylaws said, which is consistent with the board procedure, which I believe we have to comply with, and the regulation. Now, at our last meeting after the discussion, it was going to be taken away to be looked into further. I know there was a suggestion of getting a legal opinion. I suggested going back to maybe a WAPSY or OXTA to get some clarification. So I'm not sure if any of that happened.
Nancy, I'm going to let you jump in here because I know you had gone back and taken.
Sure, Jen. So Andrea did some sort of like looking through previous minutes from CPIC meetings. So we saw that there was a vote I think it was in the 2018-2019 year when it was for the community rep, and there was 2 people that had come forward. And at that time, a vote had taken place. But we don't have an idea of who, it didn't stipulate who was the individuals on CPIC who actually voted. We saw the number, that was all that was recorded. And then there was another vote earlier that the same thing. So, but we don't have any, I don't have any data. I'm going based on the information that has been shared by through Maria and through Jerry from what past practice. Then Alex spoke up and said no, that they did before vote. So, it's the will of the committee. How you want to move forward, how you want to amend the bylaws is the will of this committee, what you want to do with the positions. Okay.
And I guess I'll just say to that again, I don't believe it should be the will of the committee, because I believe it's clearly set out in the regulation. So, and that pretty much sums up, I think, what I have to say on it. So
thanks, Maria. I will let Alex has a question, and then I'm going to let Jerry speak after Alex.
Yes, so I have a couple of questions, because I do agree these are substantial, these revisions make substantial changes to what CPIC was. I have been in the committee for many, many years, and I do recall, I went to my notes, November 2019 was the time when that item was brought for the first time. My question is this, right? Part of the process of CPIC, right, part of the process of governing in CPIC, right, is filling the vacancies of the community representatives, not determining if they are supposed or not to have voting rights. That's where I'm a little bit of confused about why this topic came into an item of action in the last years, because those 3, I tried to do my due diligence. I went to see the Toronto, the Waterloo, the Algonquin CPICs, and they all have these 3 community representatives with voting rights, right? I checked a couple of the bylaws of those other CPICs as a guideline, and this is where I am a little bit confused, right? So the appointed of the community is part of the governance, but really what the the responsibility of CPIC is not determining if they have them or not, but filling the vacancies. So I am just going to talk from my personal experience this year as being elected a community rep. It really was surprising for me when it was clarified to me that after I had presented myself as a candidate for that, there was the option of not electing a community rep, which at that point I got a little bit confused of like, our mandate is to have the parent representatives plus the community reps that are distinctively Catholics, the deanery representative, the WAPSY representative, and the community rep. So I think there's two different things that are getting confused. One is why we are deciding if they vote or not when they had voting rights and when that is like prevalent in many of the CPIC. And the second is why are we focusing on, instead of filling the vacancies, deciding if we fill the vacancies or not. I don't know if that makes sense, but those were two things. It was a very uncomfortable situation for me when they said, well, you have to know that you might not be elected. We might decide not to have you. So I was like, okay, then what is the purpose of having that position if they cannot vote and they can decide not to fill it? So it kind for me became like a little bit of a mix up and it really confused me. And I don't know in the bylaws if that was only for me or other people felt the same, but I think we have to be very clear as to keep CPIC as a cohesive entity, but also as an entity that is taking in account all these stakeholders and all these parts that are going to make this committee as strong and a committee that is going to keep doing the work that they've been doing, that is promoting Catholic education and keeping, like our distinctive Catholic system Catholic.
Thanks for those comments, Alex. I'm going to let Jerry address that. Jerry had his hand up next, and I think he's probably best to address that. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jen. So a couple things in just some of your comments there, Alex, I'll try to answer. So number one, how the community rep positions get filled. And yes, you're correct. The option before the committee is to not fill the community rep position or positions. So that is simply the way it is. That's written in the legislation that way. We do have that privilege. And that could be for a number of different reasons why the committee may choose not to fill it. For example, midway through last year, our community rep, the community rep before you, he left the committee before the end of the year, and we decided as a committee not to backfill it for the remainder of the year. We ran it vacant and decided to postpone it to this fall. So that's at the privilege of the committee. How the positions get filled, and I think that's that's very much what's at the core of this discussion, and that is the community representative position that you sit in is filled by the parent members of the committee, the voting members of CPIC. So we choose who is going to have that seat, and by extension, that voting privilege. All the other positions on CPIC are they're partners and they're advisors to us as the parent members. So the director of the board, our teaching representatives, our admin representatives, our board of trustee representatives are there to work with us and to help advise and guide. All right, and that then of course feeds through to how we decide on things, usually by consensus, but on rare occasion by voting. So that leaves the voting members, the duly elected and appointed members of the committee to vote. The WAPSY and deanery positions are not filled by CPIC. They're appointed externally by respectively WAPSY and by the deanery. So that has been, and that's what it was explained to me when I came in a few years ago now, as to why those two positions did not have voting rights. And so it has been past practice. I don't know what happened before I was there, we can't seem to find any clear evidence as to whether or not WAPSY and deanery reps actually had voting privileges prior. But as far as recollection goes, and unfortunately that's all we have to go on, is that they did not. So whether that goes back to day one of CPIC and it changed at some point, I don't know. But that's what we knew for the last few years. As it relates to interpretation of what a community rep is, I mean, I would agree. I mean, we're all community reps in a sense. Like we're all part of this Catholic education community, and you know, I wouldn't disagree that the WAPSY rep and the deanery rep are part of that community, but it's the definition of community rep for the purposes of defining these voting privileges. So that's really what's at question here. The regs, and I know Maria would say that they're cut and dry and they say what they say. I mean, the regs do not specifically call out or contemplate an WAPSY representative and a deanery representative. It just says community representatives generically. So there's no clearer definition provided there. So that leaves it for interpretation. I believe for the committee to then decide in our bylaws how is it going to work for HCDSB's CPIC, and that's again what we have before us. So the cleaning up of the bylaws from last year, yes, it did take the WAPSY rep and the deanery rep out from the subtitle of community representatives and listed them separately. And the purpose for that was to reflect past practice, and that is it wasn't an attempt to change the bylaws per se or substantively do so, because they weren't voting. They weren't previously, to our knowledge, weren't voting members. So to help make that distinction, you know, we rewrote it as community rep, you know, i.e. that'd be you, Alex, and then the additional representatives being WAPSY and deanery. So that's the history as we know it. So I'll state my position on it, and I believe that the folks that should have the voting reps are the ones that are duly appointed or elected, you know, by the parent body. So all of us as the parent reps, we of course are appointed by the parent members of our community. And then the community representative that is duly then appointed or elected by us, the parent members. So I believe it should stand as is, and that it as has been the past practice, and that is only the parent members and the one duly elected community representative have voting rights. So that's my answers, and that's my position.
Thanks, Jerry. I think we have talked about this issue a lot over the last meeting and this meeting. I'm not sure at this point any new information is being added. So I'm going to ask if you have something new to add, that you please put your hand down, and I'd like to just move this to a vote as to whether or not we would like to see the WAPSY and deanery reps be considered a community member that does have voting privileges. I see Maria and Alex, you still have your hands up. So Maria, is there something new you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, I just want to about this issue of whether, you know, people are appointed or elected. There's nothing in the regulation to state that being appointed or elected is what confers voting rights. In fact, the regulations say that the bylaws determine how community reps come to be, whether it allows you to decide in your bylaws whether they're appointed or elected. And no, there's nothing in the regs specifically about WAPSY reps or deanery reps, but again, the bylaws stipulate who may or who must be a member, and other boards will have like a CPIC rep, for example. So boards, it's sort of a way to customize. So I don't think any of those are issues as to whether or not these individuals should have voting rights. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, I think those points were made before, and I understand that there is different interpretations from yourself and Jerry. So thank you, Maria. Alex, again, unless there is something new that is being added, Is there something you would like to add?
I just want to clarify, and this is the part that I wanted Gary to be, if he's able to clarify. If there are reasons that the committee has the privilege of filling or not filling the positions, that is my question. So I find it hard to understand. It's a privilege of the committee to decide to fill it or not, but what are the reasons by which they will not fill it, or which are the reasons by which they will do it? Because if we're part of a Catholic Parent Involvement Committee, we have to take into account all our stakeholders. Those 3 community reps are there for a reason. WAPSY is made out of parents in Ontario. So I think what it is bringing, it's solidifying our committee. The deanery representative is representative of the community. And these are positions that are not only distinctly Catholic, but they're really important if we want to see how we as a committee have this responsibility, not only with the parents of today, but of the parents of the future and of the parents of the past, right? So just saying that only the parents at that point have that voting, it's really confusing for me, because my perception and my idea of CPIC over all the years, I've been in the system for 18 years, is being kind of challenged with this fact that the committee has the privilege to decide to fill it or not. That for me is honestly like, I need to understand which would be the reasons by which they would fill it or not just the fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think Jerry was referring to solely the community rep and solely in specific situations, but I'll let Jerry answer that quickly before we move to a vote.
Yes, correct. So, and again, this isn't really that part of the regs of the bylaws doesn't really pertain to what we're discussing, immediately tonight. But so whether we fill it or not, that privilege is conferred to us by the regs. It's right in the regs that we may or may not. As to our reasons, it could frankly be anything. It's just up to the committee to discern what is the appropriate course of action in the given situation, Alex. So unfortunately, I can't give you a list of criteria as to what the committee at a given point in time might consider as to why not. I'll throw one out. Like, we don't have a viable candidate. We don't have someone who before us that the committee deems suitable to fill the position, and we don't have any other candidates. That might be a reason why we don't. As with last year, the position suddenly become vacant, and the committee just decided not to fill it for the time being. So that's for the one community rep position. As it pertains to deanery and WAPSY, and in my time, and granted, I've not been on the committee more, for as long as you have been, Alex, but there's never been a discussion about not filling WAPSY and deanery. It's basically past practices. It's now just a given that they're appointed by WAPSY and the deanery. And again, that's that fundamental difference between CPIC deciding as a committee who and when to fill that one unique community rep position versus the other 2 positions that are appointed externally. And there's never been a conversation that I've been aware of where we've ever considered not filling those 2. So that's what I would say to that.
I agree. Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Jerry. And I do agree, Alex, like that's a totally separate topic than what we're talking about right now. So if we want to discuss that further, we can at another point in time. Let's move to the issue at hand and vote on as to whether or not the current CPIC committee would like to see the WAPSY and deanery reps have voting privileges and therefore be rewritten within the bylaws to be listed as one of the community reps, and therefore have inferred on them WAPSY, the right to vote.
Jen?
Yes,
Jen,
Maria.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did have a question. I typed it in the chat box, but I had a question earlier that I don't believe was answered, so I just would like to have an answer to that question before we vote. So the question was, what any of the investigation that we discussed that was suggested at the last meeting took place? Was there a legal opinion sought? Did anybody talk to OXTA or WAPSY about this issue?
Nancy?
I did not, Maria. I thought the ask of me was to check what past practice was. And so that's what I did with Andrea. We went through past practice. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move ahead with a vote. Keeping in mind, everyone, that the number of times that we actually vote extremely infrequently, as Nancy mentioned when she went back and looked through minutes, could only find one actually item where we were actually voting as a committee at one opportunity. I'm going to go around and collect votes from parent and community members. I'll start with you, Laura. It'd be yes or no as to permitting the WAPSY and deanery reps a vote. Laura Gallo. Okay, I'll move on. Sarah Siwash. I don't see Sarah on the call. Tiana.
I say, so the question is, yes, they can vote, or no?
Correct.
We don't want them to vote.
Do you want them to vote yes or no?
I'm going to say no.
Okay. Jordan?
Well, this was all super confusing with two different topics being thrown in and it like really being overdone. But I think the person who made the most sense to me was what Gary said. So I'm going with no, they can't vote.
Okay. Violetta?
I vote no.
Camille? Camille Bardwell?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Sorry, we lost you there, Camille. Didn't get to hear your vote.
Sorry, I vote no, please.
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
I vote no.
Maria?
I vote yes.
Jerry?
No.
Alex?
Yes.
And I will come back. Laura Gallo?
Sorry, I was having audio issues. I
No
vote
problem.
no.
Okay. And as I said, I believe, I don't see Sarah Siwash on the call. And I will vote no as well. So that leaves, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 no's, 2 yeses, and 1 absentee. I'm not sure if that's recorded as an We will leave the current bylaws as is, as written, which permits elected members a vote, and leave the WAPSY and deanery rep as advisory to the committee, like the trustees and the school staff support that we have sit on CPIC. On the agenda,
Sorry, Jen, I had
8.1. Yes, Maria?
So I'm just curious how we address the fact that our bylaws now conflict with the board procedure.
Sorry, you got cut out there. They conflict with which?
Our bylaws now conflict with the board procedure. How do we address that?
Which board procedure are we talking about, Maria?
It's not new information. I've mentioned it a few times.
Just let's take a look at that.
Can I answer the question? The board procedure 6-84 identifies WAPSY and deanery reps as community representatives. Regulation 612 confers voting rights to community representatives.
Nancy, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Jen. And Maria, you're correct. The procedure outlines 3 community reps being the deanery, the WAPSY rep, and the 1 other community rep. Again, the bylaws that CPIC created didn't stipulate that they were voting members. Okay. The regulation says that community reps can vote. This committee has decided that they are saying, because they're not elected officials, they would like them not to vote. So I think we can, like, the procedure doesn't say the community reps and they have the right to vote. It doesn't say that in the procedure.
But community, it identifies them as community reps, and the regulation gives voting rights to community reps. So, like, do we not see that this is in conflict? I'm not kind of baffled here.
Well, but the thing is, though, Maria, we're at this point because interpretation of what the regulation says as terms of voting members, okay, then our board has decided, okay, our procedure, so that which is a senior admin procedure, to say who the community reps are. The community reps are a representative from the deanery and a representative from a WAPSY. And so the committee has decided that they would prefer to have those 2 individuals as an adversary, to be advisors to CPIC. We can, like, the thing is, it doesn't stipulate even in the procedure that they're voting members. It just says who the community members are of CPIC.
Right, but it identifies them as community members, and the regulation says community members can vote. Like, it
says they can vote. It doesn't say they must vote. Right?
I don't think you can take voting rights from, like, it's in the legislation. Anyways, I think we need a legal opinion here. This is crazy. I don't know what else to say.
And you know what? I can do that. I can take that back for a legal opinion, but I'm also going to take back that the committee of this year just voted on it, and this is what they gave us. So I will let the legal opinion hear that as well. Okay?
Great. So
Sure,
next meeting, Nancy, you'll bring that back to us?
Yes, I will. I will.
Great.
Nancy, may I ask you a question? Just if you're gonna seek the legal advice, is then should we fill the other 2 community positions with other people? Because now that we've taken a WAPSY out of the community reps and we've taken the deanery out of the community rep, means you only have 1 community representative. So if we're trying to see best practices, right, and we're referring to what you said, the voting instances that we had in CPIC, why don't we look at other boards as a model for that? The Toronto, the Waterloo, the Algonquin, who still keep 3 community voting representatives as part of their CPIC committees.
Alex, we can ask that. I'm going to take it for a legal opinion, but in this instance that we look at what the other boards do, we're following it. But there's many instances, okay, so the whole thing that we have about Catholic representation, that's not stipulated in other boards' practice. So we can't pick and choose. Like, we go to other boards and get what they're doing to understand other boards' practices, but we don't follow that. But in this instance, now we're looking to follow that. So it's really about our community and what our members have asked for. And I think that even how CPIC's membership is, and that is longstanding. And Alex, you've been around for a long time. So how we have 2 representatives from Oakville, 2 representatives from Burlington, 2 from Milton, and 4 at large. Why that was set up from the onset of CPIC was because at that one time when CPIC started, we didn't have as many schools in North Halton. Okay, now that's where our growth is. So we're adjusting now. Okay, so if we're going to go back to other boards and what they're doing, know that other boards are doing things. And I know what the mandate of CPIC is. It's about Catholic Parent Involvement Committee. But most of our other boards in our neighboring districts don't have the stipulation about Catholic being there, but it is in our practice, right? So let's get the legal opinion. You've asked for that. I will bring it back to you on what we've done. If it needs to be adjusted, we'll adjust it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda. 8.1 is feedback from the council chair breakout room that was attached with the agenda and the minutes for this meeting. I think it was anyways. Andrea, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see it in my copy, but perhaps I didn't print it. Was it
Jen, I
attached?
received the email a little later on with them,
Okay.
but I can share them with on my screen right
Oh,
now.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, so Andrea's summarized basically all of the feedback that came out of those breakout rooms with respect to school generated funds, separated by elementary school and secondary school. We want to share it with the committee today before we distribute it out to the the chairs of each of the school councils. It seemed like it was a really productive discussion, and I think good information out of that we can share with the other schools. There was an item that came up through the secondary school discussion. I don't know, Nancy, if you want to speak to the whole school generated fund issue with the student activity fees. And is it actually on here, Nancy, or is that just something that came out of the breakout groups? I know Maria had mentioned that, or?
Maria had mentioned it, but I heard that. So, okay, so first of all, I think the discussions from the sharing that was shared with us through the feedback to Andrea, it was really clear. It was really great to see what the elementary panel was doing, and that they had a lot of great ideas, and a lot of the schools were very engaged as a school community to do some active fundraising for their school, especially coming out of the closures that we had or the remote learning that we had at the schools. So that was great. Secondary had great discussion as well, but what's not as common at the secondary level is that there isn't as many large, like that one large fundraising campaign for a specific purpose like we do in elementary. Having said that, at the secondary level, one of the things that is a good fundraiser is, or it's not even a fundraiser, but a way of getting school generated funds is through the student activity fee that goes along with the registration or the option sheet each year, okay? 5 of the high schools have the listing of the type of activities that activity fees go towards. 5 of the high schools did it. I'm working with the high schools so that they could work together with the Catholic school councils to have a clear understanding how much of that activity fee is used for the different things that have happened that have become tradition of that school or want to become tradition of that school. Okay. What we learned from the secondary panel is not as many opportunities or ideas that were coming out from elementary were there. Not to say that they don't exist in secondary, but I guess the need for something to have a major fundraiser at secondary doesn't exist. The secondary schools do sometimes have, it may be for a charitable organization or to acquire something specific for the school, okay, that they will do that. And so you'll work together with your school administration on that plan, okay? So Maria, does that answer your question or your inquiry?
Sorry, I had my hand up for something, but I'm not sure what inquiry you're referring to. I think I missed something there.
When you had replied to us with the feedback, you felt that there wasn't as many opportunities to collaborate on the school generated plan with secondary as it was in elementary.
Right, yeah, right? So no, that was actually a different point, really. And just when it came to that question, there wasn't like, there was silence for a while. There wasn't really a lot of good feedback on that. And I will just say, from my own experiences, it hasn't been a collaborative process. It's sort of brought by the principal and it's kind of done, and there's not a lot of time on the agenda to discuss it, and sometimes it's not even brought. So there's that piece. I think there needs to be more of a best practice provided or something. And I would love the opportunity to discuss that further. As well, to your point, I just had put my hand up regarding the school generated fee. And yes, some of the schools list out kind of the types of things, but I would like to see, and I know other parents would like to see this too. I've heard this from other parents too. Like an accounting of it, right? And for some reason people tend to get their backs up when you start to ask for this, but not every penny, right? Not in excruciating detail, but in categories or something of the sort. And I'll give you an example as a parent. Like you know, I read one of the things the school activity fee pays for is transportation for sports teams. And then when I paid the fee for my child to pay a sport, you know, I was told that's part of where it goes to as well as for transportation. And I feel like there was a third place where that came up. But yet, here's my child playing soccer, and I have to drive to Georgetown to pick him up from a soccer game. There was a bus to take him there, but not a bus to bring him home. So I'm going, I've paid the student activity fee, I've paid my sport fee. Why am I driving to Georgetown from Berkeley? So I just think, you know, just so that everybody understands better, and I feel like sometimes when we ask these questions, people sort of feel like it's suspicious, like, oh, parents are asking because they don't trust us. No, we just want to understand, like, you know, and I'm an accountant, so I particularly.
And Maria, your point, you shared it, and I'm honest with you, I heard you. I'm glad you gave me an exact example of something like that, because that's when I said to you, what I'm going to be encouraging the schools to do together with the parents who are involved in this, whoever the representatives are from your Catholic School Council, is that you look at the student activity fee and you actually itemize, okay? Like, this is how much money, like, is it $10 of that activity fee that's going to be used for transportation for extracurriculars, be it sports, arts, whatever it is, and itemize that. And then that way, then when you're asking for the sport team, like amount, if it's $150 because your son's playing soccer, you understand, but it might be offset by a little bit of transportation. But think about it. If it's $10 for all the sports, and so they pick and choose, right? But at least you have that understanding. Okay, so what you're saying is not unreasonable. It just needs to be communicated. And I just think we could do a better job at actually listing what the things are that from the activity fee that is going. Okay, so you brought some good. The committee, the parents who were on that breakout room gave some good feedback for us to work with, and I'm going to be doing that together with the secondary administrators.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other, Nancy, did you have anything else you wanted to say about the feedback?
No, it's great. What we were going to do is Andrew and I will look at it again, and then we'll send it to the chairs, so that, because we got we made one document, and then that way they could see it and share it with their committee. Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Alex, I see you have your hand up.
No, I just wanted to point out, I was in one of the elementary schools groups, and I was so positively and really positively surprised of the creativity, the amount of the resilience, not only of the administrators and the parents, but of the students, and the way that they show that they are adapting themselves to this new situation that we have to live in, and that though we have not been able to go to the same kind of normality that we had, it was really, really encouraging to see how they use their own students. One of the examples was how for the Halloween dance, they didn't hire a DJ, but their grade 8s did that job, and how really the pandemic, call it however you want it, has really brought the community together, and our schools are really, really much alive. So I was very positive, and I just want to congratulate all the, school councils and the principals and everybody that was there, because they're doing an amazing job in all of the schools.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to the next discussion item is ProGrant. And Alex, since I have you on the line, I just wanted to confirm that we do not need to discuss ProGrant at this point as a committee, because your subgroup is intending on using those funds. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
I will give you an update next week. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, and 8.3, Maria, this was your agenda item and duty of board to respond. Maria, go ahead.
So I did talk about this at the last meeting, and I don't want to belabor the point. And I don't want to get into the topic, but I just provide it for context. Last year, our school council made a recommendation to the board, which is in the regulation again, as being how school councils fulfill their mandate. And within the regulation as well, the board has a duty to respond. So we had sent a recommendation in June. We followed up later in June. We never got a response. We followed up in September. We got a response that was a bit vague, and in the end didn't convey something that turned out to really not be true. And so it's very frustrating because, you know, it's right in the regulations that we're, you know, the board is supposed to respond when school councils make a recommendation. So how do we address that? Because we're basically not complying with the regulation. So I thought about it, and I thought perhaps one way, and I would be looking for support from CPIC to make a recommendation to the board that because what happened was our recommendation just ended up in the correspondence section of the board report. And correspondence, yeah, I think now in the policy, the board is required to respond to correspondence, but they don't always, even then. But I feel that because this is enshrined in the regulation as being how school councils fulfill their mandate, it is a more serious type of, I guess, correspondence or ask. So I would like to make a recommendation that the Board of Trustees, when they receive a recommendation from a school council, that it be on the agenda of the board meeting as an action item, not included with other correspondence that can be from any stakeholder, but that it have its own agenda item, separate agenda item as an action item, which means that the board has to discuss it. And I'm hoping that by doing that these types of things won't fall through the cracks in the future, and that they will actually be properly addressed by trustees.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. And I believe we're at the 2-hour mark, so I think we just have to take a quick vote to continue on this discussion. Is that correct? Am I correct here, Jerry? At the 2-hour mark, we have to take a vote?
Yes, yes,
we have to finish this item though, right? Because we're in the middle of it. Either way.
Either way, it is the last agenda item, so I just want to follow our policy here, but I don't foresee there being a problem. But I'll go through. Laura Gallo, we're voting to extend the CPIC meeting.
Yes, but I do have to leave, so you can please carry on.
Okay. Sarah? Oh, Sarah's not here, sorry. Tiana?
Yes.
Has left as well, I believe. Violetta?
Yes.
Camille?
I apologize. I have to leave in 5 minutes. I'll just quietly get off.
Okay. I just want to make sure we have quorum. Kevin?
Yes.
Okay. Maria, I presume you'll be a yes. Jerry?
Yes.
And myself is yes, and Alex?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead. Let's continue on, Maria.
Yeah, so that's about it. I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward. I don't think it should be a big deal, but it's just, again, just a way to highlight something that's coming from a school council and ensuring that it gets actioned. And that's really it. So I don't know if anyone has anything else or any questions.
Opening up the floor for any questions, comments. Tiana.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Maria, so basically, I guess what you're asking is that when a school council said something to the trustees for feedback, that we are treated separately than, like you're saying, the general communications.
Yeah, if it's a recommendation, not so, I don't know if it's a feedback item, but if it's a, because school councils are an advisory committee to the board, as is CPIC. So if it's a piece of advice or recommendation, that sort of thing, yeah, that it be on their agenda as an action item, as opposed to just correspondence. Because really, quite frankly, they don't talk about the correspondence. They're supposed to reply, so you might get an email or whatever, but they don't talk about the correspondence. And this piece fell through the cracks, really. it's just a way to prevent it from falling through the cracks. So yeah.
I like that idea. I agree with you that if a school council is bringing something forward, either towards the board level, that there's a reason for it, right? Because school councils are representing the parents of that community, of that school. So I think it is something, I agree with you that it is something that should be addressed at a higher level than, like you were saying, it was addressed as like a general response or correspondence.
Yeah, and CPIC as well, right? If CPIC has a recommendation, whatever.
Yeah, I agree with you. So what are the I don't know what are the next steps to.
Yeah, like I don't know if we need a motion or just do it by consensus.
I see Director Daly has his hand up. I'm going to let him speak.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just to be clear, the Board of Trustees would decide what becomes an action item on a board agenda. So while the recommendation could go to the Board of Trustees, they ultimately decide what makes it onto a board agenda.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, Maria.
Yeah, so I guess this recommendation would go to the Board of Trustees, and I guess they could decide how they want to handle it. But I do believe that the board bylaws, which they're supposed to be looking at, they set up a subcommittee. The board bylaws also outline how things appear on the agenda, including action items and things like that. So it could be they could decide to address it in their bylaws if they accepted our recommendation.
Yeah, as I said, whether it would be the bylaws, a change to the bylaws, or yeah, ultimately a change to the bylaws is also a decision that's made by the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, so we would be making, this would be a recommendation that CPIC would be making, and then obviously they would decide how they want to respond to it. So this would just be the first step. So I don't know if Marvin wants to comment at all. I know he's here, but
Maria, I think we've heard what you've asked, and I think that we can discuss it, and we will bring back some sort of response to you at the next CPIC meeting.
Sorry, so who's going to bring back the response?
Well, I will bring this back and have a conversation with Marvin, because it is like Director Daly said, it's the Board of Trustees who sets their agenda and responds to correspondence that's coming, and correspondence that would be coming, or any delegations to the board. They're responding to that. So for your ask that the authority of the school councils as CPIC if the board's going to respond if CPIC brings something forward. Am I correct about that? That's what you're asking for?
CPIC or a school council. I'm just suggesting that it be on the agenda, as an action item.
Well, you're asking
I guess
that,
it could be a discussion. Yeah.
You're asking that it's the Board of Trustees who will make the decision on how they're responding.
But I guess the point I'd like to just reiterate is the regulation does require a response. So even if it ends up in correspondence, they're required to respond. So, the fact that they weren't complying with the regulations. So I'm just suggesting this as a way to sort of avoid that, as kind of a process that will help everybody to ensure we're all complying. So anyways.
Director Daly, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just suggest that there's a number of ways. There's a number of ways where the Board of Trustees could respond to something that comes from either CPIC or from a school council. It wouldn't necessarily be an action item on a board agenda. They could respond by responding directly back to the school council. There's a number of ways they could respond.
Right, and and again, I'm open to hearing other suggestions, but I guess the point is, yeah, there are, but they didn't. And so how do we prevent that from happening in the future?
Well, again, Ms. Lorenko, we can't mandate that trustees add something as an action item. Certainly, if the feedback from this group or the recommendation from this group is that trustees make a change to or think about making a change to bylaws or whatever that is, that could be taken forward. But I just want to be clear to people that the Board of Trustees, as the governing body of the board, would make that decision. They can certainly take the recommendation or the feedback from this group, from other board committees.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, is that we make the recommendation. So obviously, I know that we can't mandate it. It's just a recommendation. But I guess my question would be, but we can mandate that they comply with the regulation, correct? We are all required to comply with the regulations. So how do we make that happen?
Well, I think if it's in this one particular case that the response wasn't satisfactory, I'm not sure whether they would necessarily contemplate changing the bylaws to address that. As I said, there's a number of different ways that trustees can respond to recommendations that either come from the school council level or the CPIC level.
So just to clarify, it wasn't just the reply not being satisfactory. It took 3 follow-ups in 3 months to get a reply. That's the issue.
So Maria, just to clarify, are we suggesting that we want to, as CPIC, write a letter, or what exactly is the action item we're discussing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was hoping for, would be a letter or a motion or something to take forward to the board. And again, I fully appreciate that we're an advisory committee. All we can do is make a recommendation. It's ultimately in the hand of trustees, whether they accept our recommendation or not. So.
Okay. And I'm not clear as to we need a vote for that, or if this is to write a letter on behalf of CPIC. I presume we would need a vote. Jerry?
Jen, if I may, yeah, I mean, I think we need something clear to vote on. I don't know if we have something, and we've had a number of our members drop off this meeting. I think perhaps, if I could suggest, Maria, if you want to craft such a recommendation, I mean, I think you've already written to the board about it. Perhaps we can leverage that and then circle back and make it an item for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm happy to put together motion for our next agenda. I don't know. Do we not meet again until January, or do we? I
Correct.
Can't remember now.
It's January 10th.
Anyways, it should be a fairly straightforward motion.
Okay.
But I know we're gone past the time. We've lost people, so I'm happy to put that together.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jerry. If you can draft something, Maria, and we'll circulate it before the next meeting, and vote on sending it. Great. Okay. Thank you. Any other business before we close off this meeting? Kevin.
Yeah, if you don't, just want to point out that there's a few things that maybe members may want to raise at this meetings. So if we can just please, if we don't have a resolution on an item, if we can move on to the next item, or even park it, and perhaps just anything that warrants further discussion. So at least we're able to table some of those things that we also want to discuss. At this point in time, I can't table anything because I don't think anyone can stomach it right now, because we've had a back and forth, and I would not want to do that to anyone else at this point in time. But if we can consider that, please, and that way we keep these as productive as possible.
Yeah, Jen, if I may.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead, Dick and Jerry.
Oh, sorry, were you responding, Jen?
No.
No? Okay, I was just to say,
I just realized I was on mute.
Yeah, Kevin, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've got to try and respect our time in these meetings and try and work through things as efficiently as we can. That said, everything has to be given its due. Now, for future business items or future agenda items, typically, although we have it on here, item number 9, other business, future agenda items, we're really talking about future agenda items. So not net new stuff to be brought up in the middle of a meeting. So for sure, if you've got things you want to bring forward for a meeting, they need to be brought up, ideally well before the next meeting. So, as at a minimum 5 days prior, because that's when the agenda gets set for the next meeting. So, so yeah, if there's anything new material, new items you want to bring forward, please do it that way. Yeah, because typically we wouldn't raise new items now, for example, in the meeting. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. No, I just meant in terms of responding to the conversation. If we wanted to add anything, I think at some point we can always sense when the conversation may not necessarily help if we do add anything to it, and that's what I was suggesting. Not anything new.
Oh, fair. Okay, thanks, Kev.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, with that, I will ask Nancy. I know that Father David to lead. Would you lead us in closing prayer?
I will. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for leading a good meeting. Please join me in the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we praise you for you lift us up. We always ask for your help and that you walk alongside us and guide us through the work we do as a CPIC committee. We thank you for helping us as a collaborative committee. As we end this meeting, we ask that you continue to lead and guide us in your holy name. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. See you at our next meeting, January 10th. Merry Christmas if I don't see you before then.
Thanks, Jen. Good night, everyone.